Good evening, everyone. In the year 1088, as the culture of Europe was beginning to wake up from a long, nightmare-infused slumber, a group of students in the Italian city of Bologna got together and decided that they were paying way too much for their classes from a bunch of teachers that they weren't really even sure were doing anything useful. And they decided that they were going to get together and absolutely change not only how they were educated, but how education worked. And very quickly, the teachers, the professors in the city, as well as the city authorities, and at a certain point, even the church, pushed back against them and very much tried to shut down the University of Bologna. What the students had done in saying we demand that we set the rates at which we pay teachers, that we set the curriculum, this was the movement that created the first ever university. Still in operation today, though clearly likely in under different forms. That it's interesting to me, at least, that at the beginning of the arc of what we call Western civilization, what Spengler called the Faustian world system, you have people noticing that the system of education, which was a patchwork of classical Greco-Roman education, which is what the Trivium and Quadrivium were, that had been stretched very thin over the Middle Ages and Dark Ages. And yes, I do say Dark Ages, and I mean it. Both the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages, that the world had changed sufficiently that that old model was grossly out of sync. So the model, which then was new and innovative, which has changed so much, is now, despite or because of those changes, also grossly out of sync. Dana and I were watching a rather interesting video where people were commenting about architecture and the state of design teaching. And I've been paid to teach design, and I have been paid to produce design for things that get built. I've done both. I plan to keep doing both. And interestingly enough, I don't plan to do either of those within a university system as we know it, unless there are some very significant changes. I did get, some years ago, I got, it was in 2017, I believe, I got a paper of mine was peer review published. I was very, very glad and thankful for the process. It was about a case study that I had done, but the same organization, the same academic, not exactly the same academic conference, but in the same neighborhood, I published a different, I didn't publish it. No, I presented a very different paper. The brief this time was to talk about how architecture and universities are facing the challenges of COVID. And so I pretty much said COVID is basically an acceleration of challenges that have been present for a very long time. And it is only a matter of time before the parents, the real trigger, I think, the real switch that gets flipped is when the parents that pay for the education realize two things. Number one, what the student experience, so-called, actually is, and what the students actually experience. And secondly, which they will be seeing because of the way COVID has brought lectures into the parents' living room. Secondly, that the students themselves will learn about how in many fields, and in architecture specifically, it is possible to get your architecture certification and get your AIA license without going to a university. You can get paid by working at architecture firms. Get yourself hired at an architecture firm. You don't have to stay at one firm. Stay at any firm for 10 years. And if you have the patience to get paid, you do not need a university. Enrollments are already down. I feel confident saying that. I don't know. Prove me wrong, YouTube. Put it in the comments if you think enrollments are actually up. Enrollments had been down to begin with. And this is accelerating. Budgets were being cut to begin with. There were very talented people who were cut from a university in England that had partnered with very usefully partnered with a rather innovative program that I was teaching at, a design program in Sorrento, but they were having enough budget problems that they shut down and let go a lot of their curatorial staff, that they had set up a little museum, which is very useful and very fun and very public facing, but they didn't have the money for that anymore. One of the reasons that this is the real reason, I think this is the real reason everyone is getting so woke, is that it's an instrument. People see it as an instrument of career advancement. That if you can find a poison pill to put in your colleagues' mouths so that you can get the jobs and the funding and the payments that would have been going to those people who just got canceled, you'll do it. And if you can convince yourself that you are a righteous person who's fighting for justice while doing it, then you're going to be motivated even harder. So then the question is, these are things that I'm not the only person saying this. So I pretty much said a lot of these things and very bluntly, articulately, but bluntly stated the challenges to universities in this paper that I presented to a bunch of university professors. And the answer that I got was a bunch of crickets, because they either don't want to admit that it's true, or if they do admit that it's true, they don't feel a real sense of urgency yet. And this is a common thing in our culture. How many people are not really worried about homelessness in our cities? How many people are not really worried about the buildings Antifa is burning down? How many people are not really worried about all the politically extreme talk? And the people who are going to tell themselves that it can't happen here, that we're just fine, that our institutions are going to hold solid. Our institutions are not solid. Our institutions have been hollowing out for at least 3 generations. Maybe they're always, I think time always hollows them out, but you got to fill them back up again. And there's been at least 3 generations of accelerating hollowed out happening. So do we just sit here and complain about it and post tweets on Twitter and get satisfied by how many people rage retweet with liking? Or do we do something else? Well, I spent several years putting out a podcast, which was one of my answers. And that grew into other things. I've taught alternative classes. So the time has come, just like in Bologna, at the end of a world system and at the launch of another. And perhaps we're too early, I don't know. Perhaps we're too early for the new world system, but we don't have to be. We can start a new type of system of education. And exactly what you are doing now by watching this is part of that. If you're interested in taking other steps, like, subscribe, comment below, because guess who's in charge of what we do? We are. I look forward to taking the next steps. There will be more on this. Thank you.